Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, finding a bottom. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, we've put out a lot of videos the last few months saying that altcoins are highly risky, that really cash is king. And, you're sort of seeing that play out right now. Bitcoin is continuing its larger downtrend. And this sort of begs the question where will Bitcoin find a bottom? I do think there's a difference, obviously, between, say, like a local bottom and a market cycle bottom. For instance, the market cycle bottom could be lower than whatever the next local bottom is, or it could be the same. But when thinking about what is an area that we could maybe see some type of a bounce off of, I would probably look towards the summer lows. And I've said this before, right? During this downtrend, it seems likely that Bitcoin will be revisiting the summer lows relatively soon, and that a bounce off of that level, plus or minus a couple $1,000s, seems to make the most sense. So more or less, I'm referring to, say, this range here, okay? And if you look at the corridor, which has done a fairly decent job of identifying bottoms in the past, you can see that it's currently at around 27K. All right, so the corridor did a good job of identifying this bottom, at least locally. It did a good job of identifying this bottom, at least locally. And now that's actually corresponding to approximately $27,000. So in terms of finding, say, a local bottom, my thoughts, my best guess, which again, it could be wrong, my best guess is probably somewhere between, 27 to the low 30s. Okay, I do think it makes sense for Bitcoin to bounce somewhere from these levels. I think another thing that's interesting when you look at this chart as well is the if you sort of inverse kind of some of the stuff that's happened. So if let's take this on a daily time frame. If you take this pattern that played out previously, this one right here. So we came down and then we ultimately started to go back up, right? Like that one right there. And you put it over here, but investors hate this one simple trick, right? If you invert it like that and then you overlay it, you could sort of argue that this, what we're currently experiencing right now. So this one sort of, was breaking down and then it broke sort of to the upside. This one was moving up and then now it's breaking to the downside. And so if you overlay that same pattern, but then just like invert it, you flip it over, it looks something like this, right? And so when looking at this, I think it would make some sense to assume that it could continue to play out. It's played out relatively well so far. It would correspond as bottoming at around $32,000 in the short term. But I still think somewhere between say 27 to the low 30s, like 30, 31, 32, something like that is potentially a local bottom area. And then in the same way that this sort of came back down and sort of back tested, if that plays out, you're potentially looking at a bounce back up to around $40,000. Okay. Now I want to talk about, would that make sense? Like, could Bitcoin actually go back to $40,000? I do think it certainly is a possibility. I think it would need to be coupled with, say, the NASDAQ and tech stocks doing relatively okay. Maybe that would happen if CPI comes in this week and it's not as high as people are potentially expecting. Last month it was 8.5% year over year. If it's less than 8.5%, maybe we'll see some type of a rally going into the early part of June. But I look at this chart and I say the next bounce is probably going to be somewhere around the summer lows, plus or minus a couple $1,000s. To the downside could be around 27K. To the upside, it could be around 31 or 32K. And this pattern, if you just flip it over, the reverse of what happened over here, that would work out to going down and putting in that lower low that we've talked about, and then getting a bounce back up to 40K. Now, another thing that we've spoken about many times is the 200-day SMA and the comparisons with the last cycle. And I've said before, if you wait until a lower low is put in, then you're waiting too long. Okay, and I've said this many times. Like, we're in a bear market. You should call it what it is. If it walks like a bear market and it squawks like a bear market, it's just a bear market. And And so what you have is you have people that are now starting to admit it's a bear market because now we've put in a lower low, right? A high or a low, a higher low, rejection off the 200-day SMA, back down to put in maybe a higher low, but then we ultimately failed to hold it. And then we saw a short-term capitulation to a new lower low that was slightly below where we were before. So then if you think about it like this, the 6K level over here is similar to the, to the 29 to 30K level over here. So in the event of this pattern continuing to play out, which we've been following for a long time, you're looking at a low, a higher low, a rejection off the 200-day SMA, potentially putting in a higher low, but then it failed. Now we're capitulating below it to go down and put in a lower low, which we already have put in a lower low from over here, but I think we could easily take out this one as well. You're talking about potentially going down to, to the summer lows, okay? And maybe a slightly bit below it if there's some type of, cascade, and then maybe we would go down to the corridor. And if that happens, you're talking about a significantly lower low before an actual bounce. So I would say probably somewhere around 30K plus or minus a couple $1,000s is most likely where we're going to see some type of a short-term bounce. And if you remember, when we drew it the other way, it looked like going down to around 30K and then bouncing back up to 40K. Could that play out? Well, that's actually what played out in 2018. After we put in a lower low, we then bounced back up to the 200-day moving average on this same line that we had been on. And if you look at the 200-day moving average, it's starting to come down here. So imagine that Bitcoin bottoms at around, say, let's call it $31,000, $32,000, plus or minus a couple $1,000s, and then it gets some type of a bounce back up to that line at the 200-day moving average. That's exactly what happened in 2018. So if you flip it, if you invert that pattern, and also if this pattern just simply continues to play out, you're looking at a very similar type of move, okay? And so the argument here is that the 6K level in 2018 is similar to the 30K level in 2022, right? That's the argument. And listen, I know people don't want to accept it. I know you don't like it. It might make you mad, but that's just what it is. I don't control what it is. That's just what it is. Here we broke down eventually. Will we break down this time? I think there's a decent chance we could. There are no guarantees, right? Only death and taxes are guaranteed in life. And so I do think, though, that the 30K level is equivalent to the 6K level over here, okay? That's sort of what I think is the most likely scenario. And looking at things like the 200-day moving average, you can see it. We are looking at a very similar type of move. I will again remind you, as I've said for months now, altcoins are risky. You don't even see me making any altcoin videos right now. Why? Because they're risky. I don't want people to think that during a Bitcoin bear market is the best time to buy altcoins. I have said, bear markets or bull markets make you money, bear markets make you rich. But YOLOing into altcoin dips during a Bitcoin bear market is not what gets you rich. That's what gets you poor. If you can exercise some patience, if you exercise patience during this time and just wait for the market to sort of work itself out, wait for the Fed to get to a point where they could actually pivot, then you're actually looking at a better scenario to DCA into altcoins. Buying altcoins over here was really lucrative. Buying them in this part was not, because a lot of them never saw new all-time highs, okay? So that's why I'm saying, like this area right here is not really the time to be getting heavy into altcoins. That's my opinion. Could I be wrong? Yeah, believe it or not, I have been wrong before, many times, in fact. So it is possible that I could be wrong on that, but I've been saying it for months, and we're still looking at a Bitcoin bear market as it stands right now. So again, my best guess is a local bounce somewhere around the summer lows, plus or minus a couple $1,000s, potentially back up to $40,000 to retest the 200-day moving average. If the bear market continues, then even if that happens, we would get rejected by it and then still spend some time over here. And then it will come down to whether we actually capitulate or not, okay? And I've talked about this before. A capitulation below would clearly mark a new cycle, clearly. And by a lot of measures, we've already started a new cycle. If you just measure it from things, say, like the 50-week moving average, one of the things I said back in 2019 is after we go back to the 50-week, you normally get a dead cat bounce. And then we go below it, and it sort of leads into a new cycle, right? You go to the 50-week, you get a dead cat bounce, and then you go below it, and it leads into a new cycle. Here again, you go below the 50-week, or you go to the 50 weeks, you get a bounce, and then you ultimately go below it, and it leads into a new cycle. And the thing is the problem I think I have with people that continue, beating the drum about an imminent alt season because we need a dead cat bounce by Bitcoin. look, I hate to break it to you, but the argument is that this is the top and this was the dead cat bounce. It's just that somehow we bounced higher than the prior all-time high. So this here, this move here is the same as this one, which I think is the same as this one, but somehow we just memed ourselves to a new all-time high at $69,000. So that is what I currently think. I don't really think we're looking at an alt season right now. I mean, you're looking at the altcoin reckoning right now. I do think that is going to continue to play out, and I do think the Bitcoin dominance is going to go much higher than it currently is. All right. So hopefully all these videos I've been putting out the last few months where we talked about alts are risky, cash is king, and to just wait this Bitcoin bear market out. Hopefully it's been useful to some people. I understand that it might not make this time any bit easier, but we've gotten through these phases in the past and we'll get through them again. I think you just need to exercise some patience, and eventually these sort of moving averages will reset and we'll begin to climb again. Remember that normally when we go below the 50, it's only a matter of time before we go to the 100, and then it's only a matter of time before we go to the 200. The 200 is currently sitting at around just below $22,000. Okay, so that's why I'm saying even if it's a local bounce at around the summer lows, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a market cycle bottom. It could just mean we play on the sandbox for a couple more months, and then we come down and revisit the 200-week SMA. Maybe late this summer, or let's say like in August or something. Okay, so like if it were to bounce and go back up to the 200-day and then come down, and we did finally get a capitulation, it could look something like that, and then maybe we start anew. Look, we could still see new all-time high. It's still possible we see new all-time highs in 2023. I don't think it's going to happen in 2022. It is possible it's 2023, but even if that happens, I think at this point you're essentially looking, as I said in the last couple of videos, you're looking at a new cycle, considering that we are below all these levels. I mean, I think the biggest counterpoint is to say that we're still above the fair value regression band, just like we stayed above it in 2013. But I certainly think from a macroeconomic standpoint, it will be hard, it will be difficult to hold this. This is the summer low, right? So I think there's still going to be some arguments about this for a while longer, especially if we bounce off of it. Will it eventually capitulate down here, or will it eventually come back this way? Believe it or not, there's certainly cases to be made either way, but in the macro uncertainty that we're currently living in, with the dollar going parabolic and the Fed remaining hawkish because of soaring inflation, I think it makes sense to be on defense, to remember that cash is king, alts are risky, and that the Bitcoin dominance should go up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. We do have Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.